Welcome back to Visual Anthology. In this continuing section, we will be covering the Overstock returns or return invoices area. We've already covered some of the basic information you might use in determining if an item should stay or go. In this chapter, I'd like to go over basically just using the return screen and populating it with information. So if we go to Inventory Control, you'll see that we have the Overstock returns options, and then in the next chapter we'll also talk about the generation tool as well. But for right now, we'll go to the Overstock returns area. And you can see it's a lot like the purchasing screen where you've got a list tab and a details tab. There's one draft return out there already that I was working on. You've also got some filters down here, and as well as the ability to say, show me just the draft ones or the open ones as well, or all of them. So just by hitting my search button, I can get different pieces of information. For now, we'll just concentrate on just doing the draft ones. Well, as far as creating a new Overstock return memo, one in which perhaps I've already pulled the titles that I know I want to get rid of. All I need to do is do F4 new, and then I can start scanning in or typing in those items that I'm going to be returning to my vendor. So here's my new RI number, return invoice that is. And let's say that I'm going to do one for HarperCollins here. There we go. So I've filled in my the vendor that I'm going to do. If there's any particular shipping instructions they had for me, such as deliver to back dock or whatever, I can track any particular notes. Perhaps this is just my simple fiction section walkthrough from spring 2008, whatever it is that I want to record a note for myself on. Which takes us over to the discount field. Now, every vendor that you do returns with they can be quite different. Some want you to send them a list of what you might send back first. Some allow you to box things up and ship that right to them, but they'll possibly send back a list of here's the credits you're going to get, and then they may even ship back the books that they're not going to accept on your dime. They're all a little different, so it's a good idea to take some time and talk to your reps or the customer services areas just to get a sense of what they're going to do as far as credits coming back to you. Now, as far as this discount field goes, I can put in a guess to say that maybe on average I tend to get, 50% of the list price back. Now it's going to ask me, do I want to include that in every item that I manually add to this list so far, and I'll say yes. I can also put in how many boxes I end up with and what I'm going to use for shipping back to that vendor. Now again, this discount field is kind of important because right now I'm choosing to just guess that I'm going to get 50% back, but of course I may get something totally different from the vendor. So this is just a rough guess for right now. As I populate items onto this return memo, I will have the opportunity to see what invoices that item came in on, at least through my receiving screen, if that's when I put those in. Or I can manually put in what invoice numbers I have from my paperwork. But we will record either this discount on the line item or whatever discount that item had when it came in the store through the receiving area. Let me pick a couple items as an example here. Let's pick this one. So this title, I have 6 on hand. I sold 1 copy last month and 4 copies in this last 12 months. It was last received in December 2007. There's none on order, so I may get rid of at least a couple copies of this. Maybe I'm a little overstocked, so I'll get rid of 4 copies for right now. And I do want to give a reason, so there's lots of different choices here, damaged, defective, so forth, but let's just say that this was flat out overstock. And so from here, I can manually put in whatever invoice I have in my paperwork that this item came in on from HarperCollins. Or if I've been doing my receiving and putting in that vendor invoice information from the actions menu on my receiving memo. We recorded that information so that here in the flip side, when you're doing returns, you'll be able to see, oh yes, I got that item in, um, and the invoice was dated December 7th, 2007. I got 10 copies in at that time, and it came in at a 44% discount for the cover price. So I can choose to associate this invoice with this return item. I can do that by double clicking on this item, or I can also go to the actions menu and do associate this invoice, or just use the F6 key on my keyboard. But I'll just select that. So you can see that we've taken this invoice information, the date and the invoice number, and we pop it into this line item. And we also carry in the price it came in on and the discount it came in with as well. So I'll enter that line. And so there's my first item in the stack of books that I'm going to return. Let me just shrink this down a little bit so you can see all the information. So we covered quite a few pieces of information that you might need. And so, of course, let me save this. So from here, it's pretty straightforward. You're just adding your line items that you're going to be getting rid of. In fact, let's maybe just add a couple more for some good examples. Oh, let's see here. We've got 4 copies of this one. We sold quite a few of this one. It must have been a book fair or something, but it hasn't been received since November, and we've not sold any in the last couple of months. So maybe I'll get rid of a few copies of this one. And I can further see what invoices this item has come in on. So, and yeah, this probably definitely was a book fair because I can see I received 24 copies and 144 copies at another time. So it must have been for a school event. But let's say that, oh, I do want to get rid of 2 copies of it at least. And the reason is, well, let's say that this one's damaged maybe. And we will pick the particular invoice that we want to associate this item with. And there's one more option I want to show you. Let me pick one more title here. Let's try this one. Here we go. So here's an item that we have 33 on hand. We only sold 15 in the last 12 months. Hasn't been received since September 2007. It hasn't really sold that many, so you know what? Let's get rid of all 33 copies of this item. This is something that maybe it was from the school, and I'm not going to sell any more of them, so we will choose to get rid of all 33 copies. And that it is Overstock, and that it came in on this invoice. And further, I want to delete it from my inventory as this return memo gets completed. So there's my 3 titles that I'm going to get rid of, and I would just keep working on building that invoice or this return memo from here, selecting those various invoices or hand typing them in into this line item. Of course, don't forget to save. Now, perhaps I've done an auto-generate where I've gotten a huge long list of suggested titles to get rid of. I can choose to print out a pick list so that my staff can be the ones to go around pulling from the list I give them. Like, let's preview that so you can see what that looks like. We give you things like the author, the section, the title, so that your staff can find it on the shelving units. So we know that we had 6 on hand, but we only wanted to return 4 copies. So we'd have them run around and make some big piles of books in the back room for me so I can start getting those boxed up. I also do have the ability to print a return memo. This is what I'll put in the box for the vendor itself, or maybe I'll fax it to them first. So here is a list of the items on this return memo with the vendor information that I'm going to send it back to. Now, I do have a few other options on here, such as delete line. Like I said, what if I did an auto-generate and had a really big list? I can get rid of an item saying, no, I don't want it on this return memo. I'm going to keep it in the store. So, in fact, I can highlight the item and say delete line, yes. And so now I just have those 2 titles left over. Of course, there's also F8 find line, which you're familiar with as well, where if you've got maybe another, again, huge long list and you don't want to scroll through looking for it, you can scan in that particular ISBN or type it in by hand like I'm doing right now, and we will find that particular item in the return memo for you. Really, from here, we have a couple of different options to go with. We are in a draft return memo at this point, and I have a couple of decisions to make. Right now, HarperCollins, at least in this sample, may not really care about getting a list ahead of time. Maybe they're okay enough with just getting the box of books right then and there, and they'll let me know what they're going to accept and what they're not. In a case like that, where they're going to be less strict about give me a list first and then we'll talk about it. In this case, we're just going to pack everything up and ship it out the door. I want my on hands to be reduced right away. So, being on a draft Overstock return memo and not having this vendor permission required box checked means when I do F12 post, this is going to automatically take those quantities out of my on hand, and it will change this status of draft to complete. The return memo is done. There is no chance for me to go back in, at least right now in this version, to edit the list and discount that they're going to give me back in credit. It's a good way to get things done and moved off quickly, but it also can have a negative consequence in that you didn't have the time to fix any of the information, and potentially, if you accidentally did F12 post at this point, you're done. So vendor permission required can be a good thing. It just depends on what that vendor wants you to do. It can be useful in that it gives you a little bit more of a chance to stop and say, okay, is this really what I want to do? So if you're not so sure about doing returns at the first few rounds, you might consider using the vendor permission required box. Like I said, with this not checked, this return memo will go right from draft to complete. We'll take the on hands out and be done. If I check this box and I'm in draft and I do F12 post, it's going to give me a secondary step, another chance. So when I say F12 post in this case with vendor permission required, it means that I am probably going to fax them this list to see are they okay with me sending all these things back or not. So I'll say F12 post, and yes, I want to post. I can go ahead and print it, fax it to my vendor, and then a day later, however long it takes them, they come back saying, okay, yes, we'll accept these items, and go ahead and box them up and ship them to us. Now, they may have come back saying, we'll accept these, but not at this discount. Here's what you're really going to get. Now, notice that when I did F12 post, we're no longer sitting on my HarperCollins return. That's because it went from draft to open. And I'm only set to see draft ones on this screen right now, so I'm going to check my open search filter and hit the search button. And so now there is my now open HarperCollins order or return memo. We have not taken these out of the on hand yet. We've only verified that we've faxed the list over to the vendor, and now that they're coming back to us saying, here's what we'll accept. So this is a good situation where I know I'm getting back a response from them, and they're going to say, you know what, we're not going to give you 46% like you received it in on. We're going to give you, 55%. So I have the opportunity to change this list of items now that I'm in an open status. So I may take a few moments here and go through and correct what it is that they're going to let me return and what it is they're going to accept it at. Perhaps I'm going to add a couple more items to it and go back with them and kind of double check. But once I've gotten this open status return memo to the point of everything's good, it's what they said I can return, the numbers are right, I'm ready to go. To get it to the next step, to get these on hands to be reduced, I do need to uncheck vendor permission required, and then I can do F12 post, which will take this from open to complete. And that's what will take my on hands out. And I may want to print it again, but I'll skip that for right now. So now I have a complete vendor return or overstock return. And in fact, I can go back to my list tab and I can say all, search, and so there is my now completed return to Harper. Now there are a couple of settings that you might want to know about just real briefly when it comes to this vendor permission required, which is under Master Files Vendors. You may want to set your particular vendor to indicate what you normally do with them, such as do you normally, or do they rather normally require you to do this vendor permission required deal? Do they not? What's the minimum and maximum for your return window? So if you populate this information and you create a new vendor return, we'll flow that information down. It's a lot like the allow back order setting on your vendors when you're building a purchase order that we flow down as well. That's about it for just sort of the manual manipulation of a return memo. That's the method you might use when you kind of are really familiar with your inventory and you can just kind of walk through the store and just kind of pull things off the shelves saying this has got to go, this is old. So that's one methodology. In the next chapter, I want to show you the generation tool. It's a good tool to use when you're not quite so familiar with your inventory on a real intimate level and you want to get a list of items that are sort of suggested to be returned. So I'll hit that in the next chapter in just a moment here.